Kia koe e tīwita, Dean.
I mihi mai na kia tātou e te inga mima o te Maru o Kaituna. Ka tīmata kia mātou hui, mo te karakia tūwhiritia. E unuhi ko te pau mua, ko te pau rota, ko te pau whakaurahanga ki te tonga. Te manu he rangi te tau I kōkeri ki te matape hoki ki tō ora. I ke mihi ia, whano, haramai te toki, haumie, uie, tai, kie, kia rara. Ka huri te rākau ki a koe, Matimona?
Kia ora, Dean. Good morning, everybody. I welcome you to this meeting of Te Maru o Kaituna Authority Forum this morning. I'm standing in this morning for our Chair, Dean, until such time we have a full complement of quorum. Dean will wear his tapuika hat for us to commence our meeting. I remind members and staff that this meeting is being video recorded and will be made available on the Bay Plenty Regional Council website following the meeting. Members, can you please keep your cameras turned on, raise your virtual hand if you wish to speak, and keep your microphones on mute when you are not speaking. Continuing with our agenda, can I please take apologies, please? Any apologies? Other than our members for lateness, who will be joining us around 10:30, that is Erin.
Sorry, excuse me, Madam Chair, it's Jenny here. We have apologies from Jeff Rice, Kiki Thomas, Nick Chater, and Erin Thompson and Nikki Douglas for lateness, but the other three are absent. So.
Thank you, Jenny. Can I have a mover and seconder for those apologies, please? I see Dean's hand and I see Councillor Daly.
Matimana, could I just add Councillor Scrimger, sorry, as well, please? He may pop in a bit later.
Thank you. That's for lateness. Jenny, got that noted?
Sorry, Madam Chair, I'm having trouble finding my mute button. Yes, I have that latest one. Thank you.
Thank you. So all those are in favour, raise your right hand. I can see many of you. Thank you. Carried. Public forum items, we have none. Our items not on the agenda, there are none. Our order of business, there is no change to the order as per your agenda. And our declaration, calling for declaration of conflicts of interest. Do we have any?
I probably have a conflict of interest. I represented Waita in the treaty settlements, and now I'm representing Ngāti. But whether that's a conflict of interest, I'm uncertain of that. Because I don't really know what conflict of interest is, because we're all having interest.
Given the items on the agenda today, I'm going to say that, and I may need your assistance, Jenny, confirming that I don't see a conflict of interest given the agenda items today. Are you able to help me in that space, Jenny?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. That's fine. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving to our previous minutes, can I have a mover and seconder to confirm the minutes as being a true and correct record? And I can see hands, and thank you, Councillor Nees. Can I have a seconder, please? Of anybody who was present at that meeting.
Dean.
Thank you. Oh, is that you, Manu?
No, Dean.
Dean. Thank you, Dean. Okay, we go on to, are there any matters arising from those minutes? I don't see any hands. Please use your hands signal. I don't see any Okay, can I see a show of hands from everybody, please, as that being a true and correct record? Can you please raise your hand so I can see? Thank you, carried. Moving to the Chair's report. And I'm going to move that I'm going to take that as the report is read. Pim, I'm going to move to you, Pim. Are there any matters within the Chair's report that need highlighting?
What I'd suggest we do here is we ask the representative for Tapawika to present the Chair's report on your behalf, if you're happy to do that.
Happy to do that. Kia koe, Dee.
Ka pai. Kia ora tātou. In the Chair's report, and I think following the Chair's report, I would like to open it up to any members if there's any verbal reports anyone would like to give. But I suppose just touching on the key points, we've undergone the appointment of the Secretariat position. So that's the joint administration between the Rangitaiki River and Te Maru Kaituna. We've appointed that position to Jane Walden, who was a successful person to get that. We'll be working with Jane over the, the chair for the Rangitaiki is Bronco Carson. So Bronco and I will be working together around, I suppose, what are the key elements that we'd like Jane to address in the first year with both the river forums and those sorts of things. So that was a wonderful day talking with Jane and getting to know. She has a lot of background, especially in the Rangitaiki. She has done some work for us on the Maru when she was with the regional council. I think she was in Kataraina's team. So yeah, very adept person for the job. So that was the first one. I suppose the second one is last Tuesday, I attended, as you'll know, as Te Maru, we put a submission into the AFCO resource consent. Last Tuesday, AFCO put an invite out for a pre-hearing to bring all those who had lodged consents together and just talk through where they are at the moment in regards to that. It was well attended, especially from iwi. And I must say, iwi conducted themselves really well during the hui. I've seen huis where they don't, but anyway, I just wanted to make that quite clear that it was really a positive type meeting. That was at the Orchard Church in Te Puke, and I think there's a bit of ground to cover in regards to the consent, and regional council were present, so a record was taken of that, and that will be released at some point. Following that, then we went on an on-site of the Rangiuru business, Rangiuru AFCO site, just to kind of align what we were told, and I think it was successful in the point where I think we're still a long way away from each other in regards to understanding what it is in regards to, I suppose, future protection of waterways. I'll put it like that for now. So there's still discussions to be had. There was a letter. Oh, in your pack, you'll find there's a letter. This was the freshwater vision. An example of what a vision might be for freshwater. I'm assuming later on that will come up in the agenda for talks, but a letter was sent to me as the chair around looking at a vision, and so I haven't commented on that because I prefer that comes to Te Maru first, and then we all have a look at what that and walk through that process. But that's more to do with freshwater vision, yeah. So those are the key things. There is a point around navigation safety bylaw review. I don't know much about it, but I think there were submissions. It was open for submissions. I'm not sure if anyone has actually submitted in that, but I might just ask Pim if he could just give a little bit of detail around that. Pim? The navigation safety bylaw review. Were there submissions?
So through you, Dean, and it's interesting to be in the same room. So apologies to members if the acoustics are a little bit funny at times. So I'm advised by our staff working on this that there will be a consultation process on the navigation safety bylaw review coming up. That consultation hasn't yet occurred. There was a brief period where sort of feedback was called for, but there's been some discussion between staff and councillors, and I understand that process will occur at some stage in the future. And I see Councillor Nees has her hand raised. She can probably fill us all in on the gaps that I'm unaware of. Councillor Nees, are you happy to answer?
Yes, thank you. Yes, council discussed that the other day, and we decided on a panel to hear submissions, and we were keen to have tangata whenua on the panel, so we agreed to have 4 council representatives, one representing the Eastern Bay, one representing Rotorua, one representing the Kaituna or Western Bay, and one representing Tauranga, but also to have 4 iwi representatives that would be selected in consultation with tangata whenua. So we did suggest that we go to the co-governance entities of those each 4 areas to help us select those people, very similarly as we did for the representative for the freshwater panel for the RPS change, where some names were put forward. I think council discussed that we at least would want them to have the good decision-making certification for chair, but that process is yet to be rolled out. But I think it's quite a significant thing that for a bylaw process, we are having half council representatives and half iwi representatives, but we've yet to go down the path of contacting the different entities to get submissions on who they think would be good people to sit on that panel.
Much more if I may make a comment on following Jane's. Just to Jane, did we confirm the names of our 4 members that we were putting up?
Yeah, yes, we did. There was Andrew von Dardelson was the representative from Tauranga. I'm going to represent Western Bay because the councillors also have to have their certification to chair or to sit on a hearings panel. For Rotorua, it's Kevin Winters, and for the Eastern Bay, it's Toi E.G.
Sure.
Thank you, Councillor Nees. And Chair, just one other thing, I suppose that the note to members would be, if you are meeting with your iwi or your agency representatives and there's an opportunity to discuss what you think about the bylaw and whether or not you're happy with what it says now or whether you'd like to seek changes, it's probably a good idea to have those discussions in the near future so that when that consultation process does happen, you can provide feedback through that representative or through the process that panel runs. Thank you.
Thank you. Dean, have you finished your chair's report feedback?
Yeah, those are the 4 points I wanted to raise today's meeting. I would like to open it up to other members if they'd like to give a verbal update. And I'm looking at Maru to maybe possibly start us just with an update of where what Waitaha representation might be at Maru. Kia ora.
The reason why I mentioned Waitaha is because in our treaty settlements, we've probably preempted the three waters. We identified all the rivers, the streams that leads up to the mountains. That was Otani Wainuku. And a lot of those are actually implemented in the acts of decree. Whakaeatinga kōrero and all those things are implemented in the treaty settlement. And when we talk about mountains to the sea, every river has a mountain. And we refer that we're talking more on customary rights rather than property rights. And our big arguments comes about when we start claiming mana whenua. Mana whenua is about property rights. Customary rights belongs to the gods and something that we bought from Hawaii. Our relationship with the aquafilters and all those sort of things are actually built in the Waitaha Treaty Settlement. So their document is highly important. The Waitaha document is highly important. The second point I want to make is under the three waters, my understanding of it, you're going to get a lot of conflicts because a lot of people will be talking about that whole consultation process and how to be integrated into the plan. There's a taniwha and a piko on every bend of the river. And of course, some will be claiming mana whenua, that's property rights, and some of them will be claiming customary rights, which belongs to the gods. And my view is leave it to the laps of the gods. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Maru.
Just to extend on that, you notice Mokoera Te Amo is present in this meeting, and Mokoera has been, he's now taking over for the resource management for Waitaha, and at some point maybe Mokoera may be the member for Waitaha, representing Waitaha and Tapuika. So I just thought, I was hoping Maru would raise that, but that's why Mokoera is present in this particular meeting. So, kei te mihi ki a koe e Mokoera, ka tau mai nei I tēnei wā karonga.
That's something overlooked here, that's absolutely correct. My role with Mokoera would be to be his assistant to get the whole background and all that. And that's why I raised that issue about conflict of interest. To mentor.
Kia ora. Did I hear that correctly, that Mokoera may become the representative for both Waitaha and Tapuika, Dean?
That is the current thinking at this point in time. Mokoera's whakapapa is strong in both, and so I will be advocating that from the Tapuika perspective, and I'm sure that will be advocated from the Waitaha perspective as well.
Oh, well, and that being the case, look, I want to take this opportunity to congratulate both Waitaha and Tapuika if that is the plan moving forward. We've certainly come a long way from where we started. So, you know, it's great to hear that maybe where Waitaha and Tapuika are heading. So, ngā mihi kia kōrua, kia ora. Do we have any others to raise any agenda items that they'd like to speak to in this meeting? Jane, I see your hand up, and Councillor White.
Thank you. Yes, sorry. I should have mentioned that there's a lot of water to go under the bridge before we have our hearings panel for the navigation safety bylaws. So the staff have got a lot of work to do to develop bylaws before they go out for hearing. So I didn't want to give people the impression that we were starting with the actual hearings and that we'd receive submissions. There will be adequate opportunity for people to be involved and to see more about what the proposals are.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Kia ora. Look, just to comment and I'll around AFCO and Rangiuru. It's good to see that those conversations are happening and our people are involved in that spaces because they're pretty heady areas, areas of real attention that's needed in the context of how those areas progress. On the coming together of the Rangataiki Forum and Co-Governance Forum and Te Maru, I think that's a great move to get that alignment. And so my question to Dean, I guess, is in the context of that alignment, I mean, there's great strength and cohesion and cohesive, you know, in that sort of sense of creating that scale. Freshwater issues are big issues, Three Water are big issues. And of course, there's all the need to consult and to be inclusive in this in the space in terms of engagement. Dean, what's the view of the co-governance entities, both the two that are there at the moment that I mentioned, I guess injecting yourself into the conversation, because these are big ticket items, and as co-governance entities, legislated for, you hold these entities hold quite a bit of strength in conversations. So what's your view on how and when, or are you injecting yourselves into that bigger conversation around Three Waters, etc.?
Kia ora, te taru. I suppose I mentioned the first year. Well, this year coming is something that we need to, that Bronco and I have kind of discussed that we need to come together on, and these are exactly the things that the reason why we need to. So we're hoping that we'll be able to set that up in the next month or two. Around what are the key items that the two governance entities should be coming together again on. I'm keen to also have that conversation with Tā Toby and look for the alignment there, and with Tauranga Moana, if they're moving towards that co-governance as well. So I think there's discussions that the co-governance entities need to have with each other around the commonalities, and then once we have that, then I think we make that injection, I suppose, into the national, the wider regional kōrero with the same whakaaro, I suppose, in regards to where we move. What we don't want to do is upset everyone else, because we identify that each has their own autonomy, but we need to come together around what are those things that are common to all of us that we can agree on to move forward as a wider collective, if you like.
No, thanks for that, Dean. I think you know, we all know that Karen Verco is on the is a iwi rep on the national body that's working on the Three Water spaces, and it would be good with the two governance organisations to have in the course of time a presentation from her as to what is happening there, what are the critical issues, and it might be a good place to inject your conversations.
Do we have any comments from any of the other members? All right, I'll move on to our next
Just
report.
one question, sorry, Mati Moana, the taru again, just of Maru. Maru, in terms of the Waitaha settlement, how far away is that for, in your thinking, for final conclusion and confirmation?
It's on the Waita, and if you explain the treaty settlement.
Okay.
There's a lot of acts of decree that's in there that will actually support the Maru o Kaituna and other, in terms of environmental, quadruple bottom line stuff.
Yep.
Social, cultural, environmental. Economics.
Thank you, Maru. Our next report is the Kaituna catchment operations update on page 16 of your agenda. Pim, I'm going to move directly to you. I'll even leave it with you, Pim, for the following report, which you're also presenting, which will be on page 20. So that would be our first two reports are yours, Pim. Ke a koe.
Thank you, Councillor Mcdonald. Yeah, so the first report, the operations report, is a slimmed down version on previous meetings. And the reason for that is that a number of the items that would normally have gone into the operations report have now gone into the status report against the action plan. And I guess that demonstrates, first of all, the amount of alignment between Regional Council's work program and the priorities of Te Maru o Kaituna River Authority. But there are two items, one on page 17, where our maritime safety team have reported that they have been undertaking a number of patrols in the lower Kaituna and have issued 20 breaches of bylaw notices to users who have been going too fast or doing reckless things. They've also put some new signage out around, or about to put some signage out around Te Kura Kaupapa Māori o Te Matai and other popular swimming holes, including Sandy Point and Pakipaki. The other item in this report is from our engineering team, and you'll see some pictures on page 18, and that is the structure at the end of Ford Road, Te Tumu Cut, sometimes called the Kaituna Cut. That has been upgraded, and you might recall approving a design that was prepared for the surface of the mole. That design is in place, and so if you go out and visit the site, you can see what it looks like now. So those are the only two items on the operations report. Back to you, Chair, just to check if there are any questions or points of clarification before I move on to the other one.
Yes, and before I go on to questions, can I just have a mover and seconder for that report? I can't say, okay. Mover, thank you, Dean. I will take my seconder as Councillor White. Thank you to both of you. All those in favour of the report. Oh, before I do, sorry, I'll open up to the floor first to ask if there are any questions or comments. Jenny, I may have to have, just sorry, Jenny, I may have to get you to help me with the hands. I'm operating off my laptop and it's quite small, so I'm having, yeah.
Yes.
My apologies to you, Councillor Daly. I will come back to you for an update from Western Bay Bleeding District Council.
I will try. Thank you, Madam Chair. I will try as best as I can. Pim, perhaps can I ask you if you can also keep an eye out? Yeah, it's just very difficult to.
Yeah, just the ones that I miss. I have got them on
Yeah.
screen. My screen is quite small.
We'll let you know if I notice them, Councillor, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Could I ask a question, Matamana?
Yes, you may.
Pim, the Kaituna mole looks very impressive in those photos. I'm just wondering if the art designs that were contemplated initially are going to be added as well.
So through you, Councillor Mcdonald, I understand some of them already have been. So when I was out there, I did see evidence of some of the designs on the surface. Can anyone local, Manu, can you verify whether they're all in place or not? That was certainly the intention, Councillor Daly, and if it hasn't yet occurred, then it's, you know, it does say minor finishing work is now being completed. But yeah, my understanding was that the surfacing, the implementation of the design and the surface is there, because I have seen elements of it. But I'm happy to stand corrected and go and find someone from engineering to give us an update.
No, that's great. I've got to go and have a look.
Dean.
Kia ora, yeah, the surfacing was done in a pattern called Potama, which was part of the original design. When it came to us, we were looking at tuku panels which draw people together. And I think we went with Kaukau and just looking at the picture, I think it's Potama.
So where are those patterns and designs appearing, Dean, on the photograph that we're looking at? Where are those?
So if you have a look at the photograph,
No.
the top one, the top one, on the surface, you'll see a kind of a staircase pattern, lightly in the concrete or the surface of that.
Okay. Oh, yes, I can see it. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's inlaid on the concrete itself.
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
So my understanding is that it was sandblasted in.
Oh,
So
okay.
you can actually, you're right, you can see it in that top image, especially at the table where the man is standing with the orange shirt. You can see some of the patterning showing up there. It is more obvious when you're on site.
Thank you. May have to take a drive. Thank you, Pam.
Just a comment, it's well worth going out there. I was out there with a few weeks back, and the people who are using it love it. And I think just having those tables in the middle with those seats to prep your lines and that, it's a good design. It works.
Is the fish running well out at this point in time, Dean? Is that a secret?
No, nothing's a secret out there. Yeah, no. When those whitebait run up is a good time to go fishing.
Well done.
Can I just make a comment on it?
Hi, Maru.
If you look through the rear vision mirror to look backwards, there used to be 3 channels there that goes out to Magetu. One on the far side, one on the middle. And there used to be boats that we used to park. They used to call it katas. Now, the success of that project will ensure that a lot of the sedimentation will go out. It's like a full glass of water, and you only drink half a glass of water, and most of the seawater stays in the estuary. The flushing of that estuary is highly important to the movement of the fish during fish seasons and all that sort of thing. The other thing is like eels. Will eels go back to where their ancestors come from? All the drains and all that where when they do the great migration back to Hawaii to breed, come back to that particular area. And the success of that is when those things start to reappear. Otherwise, it's just a big concrete wall.
Thank you. Back to you, Pam, for our next report.
Thank you. I just I have a beautiful picture of some of the eels that were sampled and counted, not taken away, from Papahikahawai in recent months, and I'm just going to see if I can put them on as my background briefly so you can see. No, I can't. That's just a little bit too sophisticated to do on the fly. Apologies, team. I was hoping I could show you that picture, but I can't. I see there is a hand up, Chairman Councillor Mcdonald.
Oh, I see Mokoera. Mokoero, I see your hand up. Kei a koe. Don't forget to unmute yourself.
There we go. Kia ora tātou. Yeah, just 2 things. One, how can I get access to the document that you're looking at? I can't seem to find it. Just quickly.
Shall I answer that, Councillor Mcdonald?
Yes.
All right. Mokoera, it's Pim here.
Yeah, kia ora, mate.
The agenda was emailed to all participants and a hard copy sent to those who requested one. If you don't have that in front of you, then go to our website and you will be able to find it. Now, what
is that what Matt has just
Matt's just put it into the chat. Thanks very much.
Okay, choice.
Yeah,
cool. Yeah, okay, thank you. The other thing is I'm just going back to your report around the safety issues and the speed issues on the Kaituna. I was actually on the river over the holiday break with my kids, and we did have a really close call with jet skiers who were going too fast, and I tried to play it down to my young fella who was with me, but it was actually really quite close. So those issues really are an actual thing. So yeah, I just want to reiterate that. Kia ora. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Mokoida. And yes, with the navigational bylaws coming up, that's exactly the type of thing that council will be wanting to hear of what's happening on our waterways. So, you know, thank you. You know, even sometimes people, if you're out there on the waterways and you're seeing these things, you know, if you can film it too, would actually help staff. But, you know, certainly that's the kind of information that staff will be looking for when they come out to talk to you. So thank you for expressing that this morning.
Kia ora. Ka pai.
Back to you, Pim.
Excuse me, Madam Chair, Jenny here. Can we just have someone to, can we move that resolution to receive the operations report before we move on?
Sorry,
We have,
I see.
we have Dean as moving and Te Taru White as seconding, but we need to have that resolved.
Thank you. Those all, I've got the mover and seconder. Those all in favour, raise your right hand. Thank you. Carried.
Kia ora, Councillor Mcdonald. So I'll move now to the next report, which is on page 21 of your agenda pack. And I'm going to ask Joe Watts. Joe, if you could please open that status report and share it on the screen for those who don't have a copy. Now, members, you will recall in our November meeting that Fiona Wood has created a status report to give members feedback on what the status was of each of the projects, the 18 projects in Te Tiniatuna, your action plan. We went through that in some detail, and members helpfully provided a lot of feedback, which led to quite a different format of the report. So what we've tried to do is to incorporate as much of that feedback as possible in this new version, and we'd really like to get your thoughts on the way it's presented this time. It's a much longer report and it does include more detail, but that was what we took from your feedback in the November hui. What we're proposing to do is to go through 4 projects at a time and then have a round of discussion directed by the chair to see whether A, you have any direction or feedback to the project lead on the status of the project and what you'd like to see happen or not happen, and B, whether you have any feedback on the format of the status report. Does that make sense? That way, if we allocate about 10 minutes to each of those sets of 4 projects, we should get through the whole thing in about 40 minutes. Is that acceptable to members, or would you rather see it done in a different way? Okay, I'll take the silence as affirmation that approach is acceptable. So as you can see on the screen, on page 23 of your agenda pack, there's an overall status for each of the projects. It says the name of the project, the lead agency, the overall status, and an approximation of the progress to date. So obviously that depends on a whole lot of assumptions around what does the complete project look like. But you can see there that project 7, wetland recreation, is at 65%. Projects 3A, 3B 3B and 3C around consented takes and discharges sitting at 100%. That will be redone each year. And at the other end of the spectrum, there are some projects such as project 9, 11, 13, 16, which haven't made very much progress at all. So it just gives members a snapshot of what the status is. Now, remember that your action plan said what you wanted to happen in the catchment. It didn't necessarily mean that the member agencies or iwi or Te Maru itself had the resources to do what was being suggested, but it was very much signalling to those agencies, hey, if you can, we as a river authority would love to see these things happen. And as you can see from that status report, a lot of those things are underway, and some of them might not be fully resourced, but they are certainly partially resourced. So if we can skip to the next page, Joe, please. So project 1, Lowland Drains and Drainage Canal Improvement. And this report comes from Jackson Efford, who is in my team. So he's showing you, there's 5 bullet points there on work that's been done to date. And one of the things that I will note is that our rivers and drainage team have allocated $35,000 from within their budget to contribute towards the implementation of best practice on some of Council's scheme drains. And that's something that the operations team in rivers and drainage, led by Bruce Crabb, is seeking to accelerate and continue. And there is a paper going to the River Advisory Group for that scheme next month. On the page 25, you'll see an image of a recent drain that has been upgraded to best practice. So you'll see the slope of the drain, the batter, has been reduced. So it's not a steep, it's not a cliff. It's a gentle slope, and it's been planted with a bit of a buffer between the pasture and the water. As those plants grow, they're expected to provide significant shade while still allowing for maintenance by an excavator, preferably on the southern or eastern side. I will note, however, that sometimes the costs of implementing best management practice in drains can be quite high. And so we are looking for ways in which that can be reduced, because some of the sites that have been implemented to date are costing more than would be sustainable if it were to be rolled out across the region. On page 26, you'll note the lowland drains, the upgrade of the pump station at Ford Road. And so I'll let you read those bullet points if you wish. The planned lodging of the main resource consent applications by the end of February seems unlikely due to the timeframes on the cultural impact assessments, on the CIAs. There's been a whole lot of geotechnical work and engineering design work, but it looks more likely that the consenting and detailed design will take place through this year. I know that is a project that is of interest to members. So our project manager, Kathy Thiel-Larden from the engineering team, can provide answers to any questions that might arise. But if you do have any, I can at least note them down or take them to her to answer. On page 27, freshwater quality and quantity. I'm not going to attempt to speak to this because my colleagues Joe and Ruben are on the line, and I think they have an agenda item later. So Joe, did you want to mention anything at this point?
Hard to share your screen and unmute. Well, this just does provide just a snapshot of where we're at. The freshwater quality and quantity ones are our freshwater program for the whole region. So you'll see that they're very similar. The update here is very similar to the agenda paper with the same diagrams. So I think I'll leave it to the paper if there's not any questions at this stage.
Okay, so that takes us through to page 31. Project 3, consented takes and discharges. And so Ryan Standen from our compliance team and Adele Gilchrist, who looks after our Excel database for consents and compliance work, have provided this update. And there are a whole lot of interesting figures in there.
Excuse me,
Yes, sorry.
are you happy to take questions while you're talking? Because Councillor Daly has his hand raised. Is that a...
We could, although I was hoping that we would do 4 projects and then stop, which is I would stop after this one.
All right.
And then do a round of all of the stuff that I've talked about to that point, if that's all right with you. Happy to take the question and answer it now if you like.
Are you happy to wait, Councillor Daly, until Pim has finished this piece?
Yeah, sorry, happy to wait.
Okay, so just a few, thank you, just a few highlights there. 1,166 compliance monitoring actions relating to water takes, discharges and stormwater discharges to the Kaituna drainage scheme within the Te Maru or Kaituna co-governance area during the period June 21 to January 22. So that's a lot of activity, you know. So you can see that there's a lot going on. Of the total number of compliance monitoring actions, 85% were assessed to be complying, which is a slight increase on the previous reporting period. And then if you look through those tables, you'll see the number that occurred in each of the complying, low risk non-complying, moderate risk non-complying and significant risk non-complying. So obviously the level of interest and or enforcement action increases as you go down those tables. So there's a table there overall. Then the second table is for those site visits that occurred. And the third one is for assessments of monitoring data. So typically the owner of a consent for a bore to take water will have to supply data to council on how much water was taken during a reporting period. And so that's what that third table relates to. On page 32, which is the second part of this, it talks about the discharge activities. And if you look there at the fourth column, the percentage complying, you'll see the dairy discharge compliance rate was 68%. And while there were 31% of visits were deemed low risk non-compliance, none of them were deemed to be moderate or significant risk. There was a 100% compliance on the geothermal water take consents. Probably the lowest compliance was on the offset discharge consents. That's the on-site effluent treatment consents to dispose of effluent from dwellings, etc. Where there were 17 instances of low risk non-compliance and 8 instances of moderate risk non-compliance. So then stormwater discharges down the bottom there in those last two tables. So what I might do, if it's all right, Councillor Mcdonald, is stop there at the end of page 32 and allow you to do a round of members. So we're seeking feedback on A, the content, you know, the projects, their status, etc., and B, on the format of the status report. So over to you.
I'll go straight to Councillor Daly because he has his hand up to ask his question. Grant.
Pim, I do like the new format. I can't see much room for improvement. It's really good. In terms of projects, the first one with the stream planting or the drain planting, the Kaituna Road drain beside the road, parallel to the road, has been planted in this manner for a few years now, and the planting on the northern side is growing quite nicely. So I was just wondering what the learnings are from that, and if it's having the desired effect, as the one you've shown in the picture is just a fairly new installation. And I've got a second question as well, but I'll wait to answer this.
Okay, so the answer is that we're also pleased with the Kaituna Road drain plantings. I can't directly correlate water quality results with that work because it's a little bit patchy. So parts of the drain have been changed and parts haven't. And the other thing about that project is it didn't rebatter the drain. It left the existing steep side because this work was undertaken about 5 years ago. However, there's significant amount of best practice drain implementation on the Tarawa Management Limited dairy farm at Makatu has been monitored for 2 years prior to this work being done, with significant fish, water quality and ecological monitoring. And now that the best practice drain management is being implemented, we'll be able to monitor the effects of that specifically related back to the effects of the works. So so I can't answer your question other than to agree with you that I'm pleased it's going okay. And we'll have some quantitative results to provide soon.
Okay, that's great. The second question was on the compliance monitoring, especially the OSET, on-site effluent treatment. And I was just wondering, what's the nature of those OSETs? Are they domestic? Are they dairy? Or is there a specific category for that?
So through you, Councillor Mcdonald, they range from domestic through to large pack houses, and there is even an OSET discharge consent for the Papamoa Hills Regional Park that's included in this. And I believe that my consent for that is one of the minor non-compliances because we didn't have it inspected and reported back to the consent authority within the time frame on the consent. So that gives you an idea of sometimes what will get classed as non-compliance. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, no, that's great. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Yeah, kia ora, Pim. I thought the format looks really good. You know, it's there's a lot of information in there, but it's all there. Takes some time to go through and analyze bits and pieces of it. So, you know, so that's great. I think there's lots of, good progress being made. I guess my interest and maybe a concern is the slowness of the cultural impact assessment. You know, and I'm always looking at these from a cultural filter point of view and under where the filter is. Because I guarantee that iwi looking at this will go, oh, that's all good, but where's the cultural filters here to deliver, the sorts of outcomes we would expect culturally? So, the fact that the cultural assessment is a little bit of a handbrake on it for some reason, not the problem of the system, but it's sort of seems to be on a bit of a go slow. What's your comments, Pim?
I'd probably prefer that my colleague in the engineering team, Kathy Theolarden, answer that question. But I understand that the cultural impact assessments have been commissioned, and it's a question of what those CIAs say and how that affects the application for consent. And I believe that there is some negotiations and conversations happening between the CIA authors on behalf of iwi and the applicant through our engineering team. It's fair to say that the feedback that was provided by some iwi in an earlier consultation phase was turn off the pump. It was quite a direct piece of feedback. I guess the good thing about this project is compared with the status quo, where almost all of the low quality water from the Ford Road pump station directly enters Makatu estuary through the new diversion control gates, with the proposal that's currently on the table, only about a quarter of the water will go into the estuary. The rest of it will be allowed to mix with the Kaituna River and exit to sea at Te Tumu. So I see it as it's a definite improvement on the status quo. But I understand that that's where some of those CIA discussions may be, Councillor White.
Can I ask one more follow-up to that, then, Pim? Who's leading the CIA? Who's doing that? Just refreshment for me.
I don't know exactly who those authors are, but I can ask Kathy to provide provide that information.
Thank you. I can see Murray's hand up.
Yes, the drainage one is an issue, and that cultural assessment of it is quite important in my view. If you have a look at the drains, it's the right plant that you're going to plant there. That's your social responsibility, cultural, environmental, and social. This drain here will give you that. If you had the right plants there, on that's planting the commercial part about it is if you had, say, guava trees there, then the farmer will make a few bob out of selling guavas, and it'll have the same impact. That's one point. Second point is, when you have a look at the cultural assessment of the pingao only grows in one place. That's at the mouth of a river that meets the sea. The reason why is pingao was used centuries ago, used to be a deep water plant. Pingao, Tangaroa asks pingao to go back to the sea. Pingao says, no, I got some friends up the creek, but I'll keep my feet in the sand to inherit the seawater. And as a consequence, if you weigh it all up, you'll find that those birds that travel around the world goes to where the pingao is. And the other thing is the porone. Those are the birds also that is attracted by the pingao. So you're planting the right plant in the right place. There is, in my view, there is a social, cultural, environmental, and economic opportunity if you planted the right plants along the plus keep the water clean. So it's an evaluation of the cultural assessment.
Thank you, Maru. Thank you.
So if you like, I can respond to that, Councillor Mcdonald. I have a suspicion that best practice drain management may well be one of the things in the Regional Natural Resources Plan change to implement the National Policy Statement for fresh water. So what we're doing now is preempting what may well be a requirement in the future. And I guess it's all about the details, isn't it? Yeah, we want to make it as good as it can be. Yeah, and we're just trying to work with what are the cost-effective solutions and exactly how much difference does it make, and which bits of that prescription, I suppose, the right plant, right place, make the most difference to the ecological and cultural health.
Thank you, Pam. I think that also signals with the concerns of Councillor White and the comments made by Maru, the necessity for that ongoing conversation between, yourselves, staff, and with tangata whenua. So, I guess that's an example of why we need to continue to be talking to one another when we're, not only putting these projects in place, but throughout the whole process of executing those projects. So, ngā mihi. I have Councillor Nees with her hand up and Mokoira. Councillor Nees.
Thank you. I really like the reporting. Thank you so much for the work that's gone into that. Just with regard to the lowland streams, we were doing some trials on floating wetlands in the drains as filters for the water. Pim, is there any update? Are we still doing those? Are they still working?
So through you, Councillor Mcdonald, yes, they are working, but at the moment our conclusion is that they're not cost effective. That they work, but yeah, the cost per lineal metre for a drain that's more than a metre wide exceeds the benefit we get from them.
Okay, thank you. And my other question was around the consent report. You've mentioned OSET. I noticed that groundwater has also got some significant non-compliance and moderate non-compliances. I just wondered if you could give us some idea of what those significant risk non-compliances are, just to give, as you did mention, minor non-compliances, lack of reporting. What would be those significant groundwater non-compliance issues?
I apologise to the committee that I don't know the answer to that question, but I will find out from my colleague Ryan Standen. Perhaps if there is an opportunity for a tea break at some stage, I can find that information out and bring it back to the members.
Yes, please, Pim, if you can do that. Mokoera.
Hi, kia ora. Just in regards to the per activity table on page 32 there, can you explain the risk and how that's what's considered low risk and how do you come to that conclusion?
Sure. So again, through Councillor Mcdonald, the low risk is where it's kind of a technical non-compliance, and that might be because the consent condition was worded in a way that makes it difficult to comply with, or maybe someone filed a return, 2 weeks later than the date specified in the consent, or in my case, so with the consents for the Kaituna rediversion, for example, it set a number of criteria for when gaugings would have to occur. The river would have to be flowing at less than 29 cumecs, the wave setup would be less than 3/4 of a metre, and the tidal amplitude would be within 5 centimetres of the previous gauging. Now, it turns out that it's extremely difficult to get all of those conditions at the same time and pre-book the staff and the boats and the resources to go and take the measurements. So you end up technically non-compliant, but there's actually no adverse environmental effect created by the non-compliance. So that's low risk. And then as you get into moderate or significant, that's when in the assessment of council staff, the non-compliance leads to either an adverse environmental effect or a significant adverse environmental effect. So significant non-compliance is where failure to rectify that will actually lead to pollution or will actually lead to management of a natural resource in a way that's inconsistent with the policies and plans of council. Does that make sense?
I think so. If you could translate that into Māori, it'd probably help me a bit. But yeah, okay then, kia ora. Sorry, I don't want to be too much of a hamu, but I have a couple more whakaaro here. Is there a chance at all to accompany the people who do these assessments?
So there is, but obviously there were 1,166 monitoring actions associated with this reporting. So that's a lot of mahi. What I would suggest you do, and I can do this, is I can put you in touch with either a member of our Te Amorangi team or with our regulatory compliance team, so that you can get a sense of what's involved with these visits and accompany staff, perhaps if there's an opportunity to do so.
Cool, yeah, that sounds good. Last thing, because Councillor Tari already pointed out one of my other whakaaro. In one part of the report there, you mentioned that you kind of operating at the status quo, or kind of, do we only strive for like just status quo? Can we not like go for beyond that at all? Somewhere where it does address cultural risks and environmental risks type of thing? Cool.
I'm not, thanks for the question. I'm not quite sure which part of the report you're referring to there. And I can respond in general terms, but is there a particular page that you're?
Oh no, I can't remember which one it was, to be honest.
What I can say is that council has recognised that the status quo isn't meeting some of the ecological and cultural values in the receiving environment of the Kaituna River, which is Te Awa o Ngā Toroirangi, the estuary. And council has estimated what kind of contaminant reductions would be required for that receiving environment to be restored to moderate health. And alongside that, your river document and action plan go a long way to helping us identify what kind of actions are required to get there. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yep.
We're certainly not. It's not a case of business as usual for the foreseeable future. This is there is change underway and on the horizon.
Come on.
Thank you, Pim. I thought I had I do have another. I can see another hand up. Commissioner Rolliston. I can see your hand up. Hei a koe.
Kia ora, thank you. Just want to support the comments about the report as well. It's in terms of its format and structure. It's easy to follow, easy to read, and in terms of tracking actions and progress on things, I think it's a really good format. Pim, I just had a couple of questions in terms of project 3 around the consented takes and discharges. So there's 1,166 checks, essentially, the compliance checks that were done in the last, well, over 6 months, 7 months or so. Is that the total number of consented discharges and takes within the catchment? That's question number 1.
No, that's the number of compliance monitoring actions. So in some cases, you might have 10 monitoring actions associated with one consent. And you might also have compliance monitoring actions that relate to activity that isn't consented. So it's independent of the number of consents.
Okay.
But the number of consents has been reported to this forum in the past, and I can show any member that would like to see a live map and sort of summary tool of all of those consents by their different categories, if anyone is interested.
Okay, so in terms of the consents across the catchment, you're able to track in terms of their the consent requirements and their compliance in terms of what's in each consent, and then be able to undertake those checks and then follow through whether they are complying or not.
Yes, that's correct. So for example, if we think about the dairy effluent discharge consents, typically they are monitored annually, but based on the previous year's compliance status, that frequency can decrease or increase. So for properties where there's been exceptional compliance on every visit with all conditions, our compliance team will reduce the frequency of visits. But in properties where there's a bit of risk or there's been non-compliance in the past, they will step up the frequency of those visits to try and ensure that any adverse environmental effects are discovered before they can impact on the environment.
Great, thank you. And that leads on to my next question, which is in terms of the table on page 11, so all of the activities and the significant ones that have triggered the non-compliant significant, of these 14 identified there, how many of those would be ones that are kind of perpetual, and then does this lead to enforcement?
Again, I'm going to have to go to my colleague in compliance to get the answers to those questions, Shad, which I'm happy to do so, and I can probably come back after a break with some answers to those questions. But yeah, so council under the RMA has a number of different options for enforcement in the case of non-compliance. Sometimes, the first option is usually a chat, and hey, we don't think that you're meeting the conditions of consent here. We'd like you to do X, and they say, oh, yep, sweet, we'll do that, and that gets recorded, and the matter is ended. But for significant non-compliance, that will typically go through a process of either an abatement notice or an enforcement order, or in cases where there's a significant adverse effect and non-compliance, prosecutions under the RMA. And I believe we have taken a paper to this forum in the past on what that enforcement looks like. It is included in our annual report, regulatory compliance report. And Councillor Nees or Councillor Mcdonald might be able to help me, but I believe that is often released around about October for the previous financial year ending 30 June. So what I will do is at probably the last meeting of Te Maru for this year, for this calendar year, I can sort of append a copy of that regulatory compliance report, or at the very least put a link in your report so you can go and interrogate it further. Is that helpful?
Thanks, Pam. Yep,
Okay.
yep, no, that's great, thank you.
Thanks, Pam. Do we have any other comments on this report? Or any other questions on this report? I don't appear to have any. I guess I just want to echo the sentiments of Mokoida, and Pam, maybe it's a meeting between the two of you, to assist Mokoida with some of the concerns he raised. So please make the contact and assist where you can to, I guess, help Mokoida around some of the issues that he raised in his kōrero this morning. Before I move on to the next report, and before I move the chair role back to Dean, I understand Erin was with us now. Morena Erin. I just need to have a mover and seconder to receive this report, please.
Councillor Mcdonald, if I may, that was only the first quarter of the status report. We can scurry through the remainder of it if you like, or we can skip it completely, but there are a number of other projects in the action plan that we haven't yet talked about at all. But
my apologies, Pam. I'll let you continue. Until it's completed, and then we'll ask for a mover and seconder. Sorry.
No, it's completely at your discretion. But if the members, it seems like there is quite a high level of interest in the status report. So let's see how we go. So we're back to page 33 of your agenda, which is page 12 of the status report. And that is project 3, consented takes and discharges continued. This is where the city and district councils have been asked to provide similar reporting data to that in the regional council consented takes and discharges report, which was completed previously. So Western Bay of Plenty District Council has no update to give, but they're on track to provide the annual reporting data at the end of the year. TCC reporting will be completed as the consents require. And Rotorua Lakes Council, there are no urban wastewater or stormwater management systems within the Rotorua part of Te Maru's rohe. So that's the update from the district and city councils within your rohe. Over the page, there's a brief update on Project 3D, an annual meeting with representatives of the Rotorua Te Arawa Lakes Strategy Group. That meeting hasn't yet been set, but I understand Dean is onto it. On page 35, focus catchments. So your project for focus catchments, there are currently 2 focus catchments that are funded by council, and your action plan identifies another couple. So a little bit of an update there on what's going on and what's not going on. But I'm really excited to announce that the constructed treatment wetland on the Te Arawa Management Farm, just upstream of Whakapau Kōrero wetland and the estuary, there it is, thanks Joe, construction has begun. Now, that's a really significant piece of work. It is one of 3 large constructed treatment wetlands that we are building to the NIWA constructed treatment guidelines. One there, and then there's 2 in the Pongakawa catchment. So one at the junction of Maniatutu Road and State Highway 2, and one at the junction of Pongakawa School Road and State Highway 2. They're just outside of your catchment area. And we are planning a field day in May of this year at that Tamil farm to show anyone who's interested, especially other farmers in the catchment, what that best practice drain management looks like and what the treatment wetland looks like and is aiming to achieve. Over the page 36, there's a quick update there from Western Bay of Plenty District Council and TCC on the lower Waiari. On page 37, your project number 5, farm environment plans. So there's a couple of things here. Your action calls for a farm environment template to be developed or adapted, and then for those to be implemented. Now, since your action plan came into being, there have been some regulations put in place under the RMA to require freshwater farm plans nationally by 2025. And so what we're trying to do is to work with that national process through the Ministry for the Environment and with our regional sector colleagues around the country. But we are also working with local suppliers of farm environment plans and our own version of existing farm environment plans to try and get something that's fit for purpose. And I think the real challenge is for us here is making sure that in catchments where the status quo isn't providing good quality water and that sort of thing, that the farm environment plans act as a catalyst for getting those actions on the ground done. So in catchments that are not under pressure, it's not so important that they are aspirational, but in the Kaituna catchment, which is under some pressure, I believe that these farm environment plans play a really important role. And yeah, but we are going to collaborate with MFE and use the national system rather than getting out ahead of ourselves and coming up with something that then gets replaced by the national system. Over to page 38. Couple of things to mention on the Kaituna rediversion. We have assessed the flow of the water from the river to the estuary, and it is just slightly higher than what we predicted, which is good. It is leading to good outcomes in terms of estuarine ecology and cultural health. And if you look at those last little pictures at the bottom there, you can see a patch of seagrass in that middle picture. Those orange, those crimson arrows on the left-hand side show you a whole bunch of little patches of seagrass which are springing up between the Whakapau kōrero wetland, the Whakaue marae, and I'm not sure what the name of that little island is in the estuary. Maru will remember it shortly. But it's awesome to see those popping up. They are getting a bit of a hammering from swans. And so we're now working with Ngāti Whakaue and Toi Ohomai to try and get a student and a couple of the kaimahi from their Jobs for Nature program to test a few different devices to see whether they can reduce the swan grazing pressure as the seagrass comes back. I'm going to jump across to page 39, which talks about wetland recreation. And you'll see there some images of Te Pāika wetland, which was poor quality dairy pasture until 2018 and has since been converted into estuarine wetlands. And if you look at that bottom picture, you'll see just how well the vegetation has established itself since the community planting days back in 2018, 2019. And thanks to those of you who attended those work days. There are 82 vegetation plots being assessed this week and next week by our science guys and a representative from Ngāti Whakaue. I'll do a couple more pages before we do another round, or I can go right through the rest of the status report, Councillor Mcdonald, whichever your preference is.
I don't have any hands up at the moment, Pim, so maybe we just keep rolling through the report.
Okay. Yep. So on page 40 now, you can see a couple of images of the Te Paurep or Kaituna wetland creation work. It's broadly speaking been very successful and has ended up costing less than we had anticipated, which is great. A couple of issues with Mercer grass popping up at higher than expected densities, which is a wetland weed plant. But we've had a massive input from local kura in terms of getting involved with planting over the last year in partnership with Maketu o Ngātoro Wetlands Society and representatives from, I think Liam Tapsell, Raponi Wilson, and a couple of others have been instrumental in helping get that stuff done. Skipping through to page 42, one of the team members, Michael Tyler, who's one of my younger staff, he captured this photograph of a bittern at Tumukawa, which is land that's owned by Ngāti Whakaue and Tapawika jointly as a result of an Office of Treaty Settlements sale agreement and is now leased by the Regional Council for wetland creation. And it's cool to see that this was pasture up until 2 years ago, and it's now got banded rail, bitterns, crakes and fernbirds all using that habitat, which is amazing to see. At the bottom of that page 42, you'll see a picture of a lot of us being led by Terry Tapsell, looking at one of the culverts that supplies water from the estuary to Whakapau kōrero. And there has been an issue where locals have vandalized the fish-friendly attachment, which means that, well, I don't know if it's locals for sure, somebody has been cutting the cable, and that means that the culvert doesn't open on the incoming tide at all, and so those fish haven't been able to get in. So we're changing the design of it to make it more vandal-proof. It's using a design that just relies on a spring mechanism rather than a cable, so there's nothing to cut. And we'll see how that goes. Across to page 43, Te Hauuri o Te Kawa, that's the formerly known as the Borrow Pits or the Biddeley wetland. That's that inanga spawning habitat project up the about 1 kilometre upstream from Ford Road, Uncle Boy's place. And that continues to go from strength to strength. Some regional council environmental enhancement funding was used to build that bridge and some boardwalking to enable all-weather access through the site. On page 45, this is an update from Katie McGinnity at Western Bay of Plenty District Council. And I'm not sure, Katie, are you on the line at the moment, or is there another representative from Western Bay who wishes to speak to the reserve management planning process?
Sure, it's Matt here. Katie's not available. I think we've got another agenda item coming up on the RMP. So I can speak further to it then.
Sounds good. Thanks, Matt. That's great.
No worries.
But it looks like formal consultation will take place from Monday of this week through until the 24th of April. And that's where the public and yourselves, if you wish, can have input into that reserve management plan. Councillor Mcdonald, unless you'd like me to stop, I'll carry on and we'll see if we can get right through the status report and then go for another round of questions. The Habitats Network, Mike Tyler has provided this update, and you'll see the picture, which is pretty fascinating, showing 3 possums caught or trying to get themselves caught in the Paraiti catchment through the work of a care group up the hill near Te Ranga. It's great that there's all these different places in the catchment now, Te Whakakaha, o Tane Wainuku, Paraiti, etc., that are all doing little bits and pieces to contribute to the quality of that habitats network. On page 47, Mike has snipped something from our care group dashboard, which shows you that there were 186 pest captures from 1,150 trap checks, and that's in addition to the pest control that was undertaken through the use of poison delivered in bait stations. So there's a lot of good stuff happening up there. Over to the Pātaka Kai project 9A. So this update was provided by Alva. So Hemi O'Callaghan, who's also one of the Kaimahi for Ngāti Whakaue's Jobs for Nature project, has been appointed as Kaiarahi to oversee Kaiawa monitoring and habitat restoration planning. And so he's just waiting for a couple of bits and pieces in contractual terms to complete that work. Project 10, page 49. Dean, would you like to say anything on that one, on the communications strategy and or the website development?
Yeah, just quickly. I just got a whole lot of feedback. Is that all right? As it reads, I suppose one of the areas is Te Maru o Kaituna had its own web page. The provider of that has since disappeared, I suppose, and so we're just working through how we can get that back on board. And in the interim, I've asked regional council if they would be good enough to host that page until, well, what we're doing until we can find somebody else to host the website, I suppose. And just looking at how we might be able to develop communications at a kind of an iwi level as well. So whether that's newsletters or hui. So we're just still working on that. Yeah. Thank you.
Kia ora, Dean. Thanks for that update. And yeah, thanks members for bearing with us as we go through this, but I love the fact that there's so much to report to you on your action plan. Project 11, we're on page 50 of your agenda now. And this update has again been provided by Katie McGinnity, Kaituna River Access Mapping. So that links back to the reserve management plan that Matt might talk a little bit more about later. And at present, there is no funding for an additional waka launching site, but as is referred to in the report, that could be put on a future LTP agenda for the district council. Noting that the Waka Ama Club is using the site for their birth and launching down at Uncle Boy's quite actively. There's a lot of activity down there. Project 12, page 51, Kaituna Cycleway and Walkway. Scott Parker from Western Bay has provided a quick update. No change since the previous update. The Cycling and Walking Strategy Action Plan was adopted by Council in November 2020, and that does include some links within the area of interest of Te Maru o Kaituna River Authority. And if you want to, you can follow that link to see where they are. Some of those links include, for example, the ability to access the Kaituna's stop banks between Makitu and Ford Road, between Ford Road and the motorway bridge, and then potentially from the motorway bridge further up towards the Waiari. But I'll just skip over that. If anyone else wishes to comment in the Western Bay item later, they can. Project 13, page 52. An interpretation plan. So that isn't yet underway, but it has been identified as potentially a good project for an intern or a student to take on. Project 14, the Upper Catchment Gateway. This update comes from member Nick Chater. I won't try and read the whole thing, but he has so far, it says, negotiated 6 hectares of land to be part of restoration project, removal of gorse and pest plants, the planting of 2,000 plants, etc., etc., etc. So it looks like there's some good mahi underway up there. Do we have a Rotorua Lakes representative who wants to mention anything further on that one, or shall I skip to the next project?
Oh, kia ora. Not much more to add other than what he's already put there, but they are looking at seeking more funding because it has been quite a success so far, and Nick and the team are just really excited about what's going on there. So yeah, it's a very, very exciting project actually, and also looking at how they can get rangatahi involved more in some of those plantings too. So yeah, more good things to come.
Thank you, Councillor Tapsell. We're nearly there, members. There's just a couple of projects left in the status report. I'm now on page 55, project 16, State of the Awa Integrated Monitoring and Reporting. And you'll see that Gina Mohi from our science team is listed there as the project lead. That hasn't yet been done. And depending on your aspirations, you know, it could be huge or it could be quite simple in terms of linking existing council reports, especially because there is no separate budget within council to undertake a separate report that is, you know, significant in size. Yeah, I don't really have anything further to add to that, but if you wish, we can ask Gina to talk. Oh, I see Councillor Nees has her hand up.
No, I wasn't going to report. I had a question. just with regard to this, I know Gina is our specialist in Motoranga Maori, whether or not that was, when we were talking integrated monitoring, we're talking about integrated Western science monitoring in Motoranga Maori, if that was the intention.
Yeah, so my understanding is that it came from this project. I believe the genesis of it was based on seeing the report on the state of the environment for Tauranga Moana, which had a joint, science Mātauranga focus throughout. And I think that's what members were calling for when this was put into your action plan. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, no, Dean is nodding his head. So yeah, and I guess yeah, just to be brutally honest, we haven't had the time or the resources to put that together yet. So let's skip across to project 17 on page 56, the catchment network mapping. And so there's planned completion date of the 29th of July 2022. That's from our geospatial team leader, Glenn Clarkin, alongside Katie McGinnity from Western Bay. So I'm hopeful that we can bring you an update on that report later in the year. All right, and then the last bit there is, well, that's it, I think, isn't it? Because then we jump into the paper from Matt. So I'll hand it back to you, Councillor Mcdonald, to run another round of questions or feedback, if you like.
Thank you, Pim. Thank you. That was a very comprehensive report, excellent report, Pim. So I'm actually going to throw it over to the members. I don't appear to have, oh yes, I do. Councillor White, Maru, I see your hand on the screen. So we'll go Councillor White, Maru, Tapsel.
Yeah, just a comment. It's a real complex project collective, if you like, Pim. And when you're trying to follow it, you know, your eyes go sort of cross-eyed a little bit because there's a lot. Having said that, seeing is believing, you know, and seeing the progress that's been made on the ground is a hell of a lot stronger statement than words on paper, I have to say. So it's really, really pleasing to see the development of some of those ecosystems and the return of species and so on, greening up the place again. It's really, really encouraging. And the involvement of rangatahi, involvement of different entities. You know, it's really quite a major project and looks like it's really coming together really, really well. And it sounds certainly like you've got your headspace across all of those particular projects, which is great to have someone who can put their finger on the pulse across that wide range of projects. You know, I mean, I you know, in terms of the cultural element again, I think it was project number 13, a most unfortunate number, but it's got a little bit behind the time, a little bit behind, but you know, I can see just by participation in these spaces and the greening up and the entities involved that it's action on the ground that's happening. And so, you know, the project itself, you know, well done, man. I think it's come together really well. And you know, just congratulations to all those concerned. And a ways to go, obviously. And keeping in touch with iwi across the space is going to be really, really important. As you know, I've already stated that. So kia kaha, that's all I've got to say. Well done.
Maru and then Dean.
I just want to point out that how is this whole thing prioritised? Which comes first, which comes last? And that's the first point I want to make. And I'll just give an example of that is that, you know, I've always mentioned that the Port of Tauranga is Rome, all roads lead to Rome. And the Kaituna happens to be on that pathway to Rome. And what's happened in there. So if we're talking about cycleways, then we must be looking at tourism or something like that in the future. So that could go back a wee bit on the back burner where fundings could be supplied for other things. That's it, putting those things into priority, those issues into priority. And the second thing I want to point out is that this road's leading to Rome. We're actually talking about the lungs of the fish that Maui caught. So what I'm talking about is all the waterways, and the three waters are highly important, that you've got all the lakes and all the rivers and all the streams have to be included in the lungs of the fish that Maui caught. So they're highly important. And the third part of what the statement that I want to make is that where is the three parks situated? In 2006, I think there was the Papmore Hills, the park at Wairo, and the park for the Kaituna. Where does that sit in this whole planning scheme? Because some of those water issues and they could be included in the new park that's being supposed to be put into place. Incidentally, the Port of Tauranga was supposed to pay for it. So the question is, how are these things prioritised?
So through you, Councillor Mcdonald, I'll just answer that. The prioritisation setting depends on which entity's been identified as the lead on each project. And so if you go back to page 23, you'll see the list of all of the projects and their lead agency. So some of them lie with the Regional Council, some of them lie with TMOC itself. And I'm sure Dean would be happy to take any volunteers to help him with those ones. And he'll probably be tasking the Secretariat with those. But also, you know, there's some Western Bay ones and some Rotorua Lakes ones. And so it's a question of each of those organisations looking at the project and comparing it against everything else that they've been tasked to try and achieve, and then deciding whether or not and to what extent they resource the money in there. And in terms of the coastal park that you talked about, on page 22 of the agenda, so that's the very first page of the status report, just up one page from that, Joe, it talks about the three projects that haven't yet been started or funded, and the coastal park network is one that hasn't yet got out of the gates, but it's sitting there waiting to do, because there is a lot of publicly accessible land already. So, kia ora.
Kia ora. Kia koe, Dean. You're on mute, Dean.
Sorry, thank you. Just some comments, and the key one is, now that we have a secretariat, Te Maru, is, well, at least its tangata whenua members now have a resource to dedicate towards these projects, which we've put our hand up to lead. So I just want to go back to the Pātaka Kai one, Project 9. So just a brief overview around what's happening there. So you'll see in the report, Hemi O'Callaghan has been appointed. We've contacted CEs of the various iwi, and we've with the tono that we'd like to talk to their resource management teams or managers who are in regards to what we're trying to do with the Pātaka Kai one. But it's also just on that one there, is we've given ourselves 3 months, so well up to April, June, to work through a program which we're going to be holding a wānanga on the 11th, Friday the 11th of March. That'll be hosted at Makahai Marae, to draw those people in, plus kaitiaki, and I think it would be also ideal to bring possibly Gina and your team, Gina, if you're listening, into that hui as well, and we'll be able to look at the state of our integration, monitoring and reporting. The key is why we want the 3 months is to prepare, is because this program is going to start in June, and Matariki will signal the beginning. So we've shifted to bring in the Māori aspect, I suppose, of monitoring. We are now shifting to Matariki as being the start of the program and the monitoring. We'll work our way through that to Matariki next year. So we've we've adjusted the timeframes to align to the lunar calendar, and this is what we'll be wanting to teach, and also wanting to use that as the monitoring in comparison to Western science, I suppose, for the want of a better term. So it's around how those two might be able to join and merge together. So I suppose what I'm saying is project 9, project, where is it? 13 and project 14. Oh, it's not 14, project 16. We're looking at how we might be able to merge them because there's commonality in there. And for a long time, the Kaituna cultural historical heritage, the view is that we could pull that together, and we're maybe looking at an intern from any of the iwi. They do a desktop study around the treaty settlements, as Maru always brings up in regards to what has come through on Waitaha, what has come through on the Tapuika, what is coming through in Ngāti Whakaue, what is in the Pūmautanga, all referencing to the river. So, and then there's all their work that sits within the regional council. So it's around pulling all that information together. So the interpretation plan, or developing an interpretation plan, is going to take a while. But with the Secretariat being as one of our resources, we're hoping to be able to pull that knowledge base together so that we can start to look at how that will be interpreted. So basically, there's the fishing plan, the monitoring the Pātaka Kaiwa, which is from the estuary all the way up the river, and then the historical, and then the integrated or the work that the integrated monitoring. So I suppose at the moment our conversations we're having is those from a Māori perspective are all interconnected, and so that's how we believe they need to be treated. And so even though it's not strictly within a descriptor, from a Māori perspective, they merge, and so we'll be able to maybe do the 3 projects together. But until we have that hui, and I suppose get the whakai from the iwi who are involved, and also iwi who aren't part of Te Maru, but have things, parts of the catchment, the wider catchment anyway. So, I mean, it's a work in progress. But I suppose if we're looking for a time frame, we're looking from now to April, with the idea that we prepare, and then from Matariki will be our starting point where we start a lot of this type of mahi. So I just wanted to share that time frame, that it's not the time frame that we may see in reports, but we're developing a time frame that aligns to te maramatanga mo te marama. Yeah. Hi, that's really all.
Thank you, Dean. Thank you. So that actually brings us to the end of that report by you, Pim. So again, I'll ask for a mover and seconder of that to receive that report before I hand back to you, Dean. Thank you. I have a mover and Councillor White, and a seconder, and sorry, I can't see the hands.
Manu.
Manu. Thank you, Manu. Thank you. All those in favour, please raise your right hand. I see the hands. It's carried. I'll now hand back the chair role to you, Dean.
Taiho, before you do that, we are 2 points out on the agenda, and I think you've been running it fantastically. So I'd like to give it back to you to finish this meeting. That would be, thank you. Emihi.
All right, yummy, yummy. All right, then it's back to me. So back to our run sheet, and I'm looking at the Essential Freshwater Policy Program. Is that correct, or have I missed one?
One further up, Councillor Mcdonald.
Yes, sorry. I've just noticed that now. Aroha mai, so our next report is the Te Puke Makatu Reserve Management Plan Review. I haven't got a presenter for that. Can you help? Oh, Matt, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, Matt. I'll hand
Kia
over
ora.
to you. Thank you.
Apologies, Katie's the expert on the reserve management plan, but she's currently on leave at the moment, so you've got me. It's essentially the reserve management plans, Western Bay of Plenty District Council's guide to developing the reserves in the Te Puke Makatū area. And it sets what we're going to do over the next 10 years and how they're going to develop and some of the policies around that. So we opened up for consultation Monday. It's open until the 26th of April. There's 3 concept plans, so big plans that we've got to upgrade some parks, and they are for Midway Park in Pukahina Beach, a dog park to be put into place at Lawrence Oliver Park in Te Puke, and to upgrade Spencer Avenue Reserve in Makatū. There's also 3 extra policies in there to provide extra shade, increase accessibility, and more play equipment for recreation and open spaces. So Te Maru Kaituna has been referenced in the document, and Te Tini Atuna action plan is also referenced with regard to some specific reserves as well. So we've made sure that we've actually given the recognition that the body deserves. What we're seeking is we've got out for public consultation. We'd like direction whether you would like to have a workshop with council staff, or whether you'd like a few of you to meet together with council staff and have a meeting on this. If you're intending to put in a formal submission, we're happy to have a chat around that as well. We've got consultation events coming up. We've got the Makatū markets, the Wonder Dogs walking events, a Midway Park Fun Day in Pukahina, and public hearings, but that all depends on COVID situation, obviously. So the RMP covers all of council's reserves in the Te Puke Makatū area. So that includes esplanade reserves that go alongside the streams and rivers in the district as well. So that will have direct relevance. So I encourage yourselves to either submit, and the iwi authorities and hapu to put in submissions, especially regarding around access to sites. And if you want waka launching sites to raise that, and where you think that would be good to go. But I'm happy to try and answer any questions or note them down, and Katie can come back to you.
Thank you, Matt. Do we have any questions from the members?
Not a question, Chair, but I think Te Maru should put a submission towards us, and it'd be nice maybe our next meeting to maybe have a presentation on the agenda.
We can organise that.
And I think because access to the river is one of the points, I think, in the Tini Atuna work program or plan. So it'd be interesting to see where those reserve areas are, and that'll help towards any submission that maybe Te Maru puts forward, or iwi members. Cheers. Thanks, mate.
Just further to that, there is on our Have Your Say website, there is a link down the side to an interactive map. So it's got colour coded all regional councils, reserves, our reserves, and DOC reserves. So you can see where they are on the map and how they align to access to the river. Some of them are undeveloped, and that might be something that you want to submit on.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you, Dean. Any other comments or questions from the members? I don't see any hands up, so thank you, Matt. Oh, sorry, Manu.
Yeah, thank you for that, Matt. I've got a copy of your paper on computer, but I'd like to also make a presentation, if not with you, to present to our runanga and to Ngāti Whakaue ki Makatū. Thank you.
I'll see what I can organise, and we'll be in touch shortly.
Thank you.
Cheers.
I don't appear to have any more questions, Matt, so thank you very much for that.
There's
And
Maru.
are you speaking again, Manu?
No, Maru. There's Maru.
Maru.
He's got
Sorry,
his
I
hand.
can't see your hand, Maru. And I haven't got you on the screen. Maru.
Yep. Maketu is very controversial, and so the historical account needs to be taken need to be taken really into account before you go rushing off and preempting plans. And I challenge Western Bay to do that, to ensure that there's a whole historical background there, and which is part of our treaty claims that's going through there from particularly Ngāti Tunahopu from Ngāti Whakao. Now that I've mentioned Tunahopu, there'll probably be knives being stabbed in my back. But it's a sensitive issue about me. Then there's Ngāti Pikiao issues, and then there's little Waihi, which was the Waihi, and all those issues. And I don't want to talk about ownership because this is where there's property rights come in, discolours the customary rights. So it needs to be not rushed. That's the only comment I make here.
Yes. Thank you.
Proper consultation, avoid litigation.
Thank you, members. So can I have a mover and a seconder for that report? I've got a mover in Dean, and just looking now for a seconder, please. Thank you. Thank you, Aaron. All those in favour, can you raise your right hand for me, please, so they can see? Carried. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Moving on to our next report, and is it our last report? On essential freshwater policy program, and on page 62 of your agenda. And I'm going to hand that to you, Joe, and your team. I see Anaru is on the in the chat as well. So I'll pass to you, Joe.
Kia ora. Are you able to see the couple of slides there?
Yes.
Just see if I can. So I've only got a couple of slides, and this is about the report that's on page 62, which is the Essential Freshwater Policy Program for 2022. And it's just a brief outline of Toi Moana's Essential Freshwater Policy Program and the opportunities to be involved this year, bearing in mind that the program's a very long-term project, and also an update on the progress that we've been making on the Kaituna vision since our last hui in November. So you'll remember that we've got also a little wee brief update on where proposed change 5 is at, which is your change to the regional policy statement to recognise and provide for your river document. So this is just the diagram that we've seen a number of times now, setting out the process, and we're in this vision setting values part of the work at the moment. And you'll remember in November we presented an example vision pretty much based on the river document and also iwi management plans relevant to the Kaituna. And since then we've collated values across the region and for the Kaituna, and you'll remember we had the engagement tool, the Participate Bay of Plenty website that you could put your values in or check that there was the right values in there. And at the moment we're working on the environmental outcomes. So that's just further up on this diagram. So we're trying to work on all parts of this diagram, getting material together so we can have conversations with iwi and with a wider community as we go, involving everyone as we go. Then we'll be working on targets for attributes, and they're all technical terms that are in the National Policy Statement for Fresh Water, which this diagram helps to understand. But as you'll see on this diagram, you're going round in circles a little bit, and that may well feel like that for Te Maru, because we've been on this journey a long time, and you guys have made a lot of headway with the river document and setting your own visions. So that's why it feels a bit repetitive. So just outlined in the report on page 64 is, as I said, we're talking about 2022 this year, but it's a longer program. This red line, you'll remember, is kind of D-Day for the council's changes. We have to, the government's National Policy Statement for Fresh Water asks that we notify changes to our regional policy statement and our regional plan to implement the freshwater stuff. So that's what that red line indicates, that we're working on all these things at once, but by 2/24, the legislation says by the end of 2/24, our councillors are keen for us to be a little bit early and notify by July 2/24, so a little bit ahead of time. So the key tasks are set out in the report, and that's developing those targets, the limits, and the policy options, where we go, you know, so we can have some good, strong engagement with tangata whenua along the way, and more solid engagement here in this yellow part with the wider public for the whole year of 2023. So the green indicates here more of the online feedback with the wider community, whereas this teal colour is involving Māori all the way through the process, given the strength in the policy statement to involve Māori tangata whenua, if in fact they'd like to be involved, or
I hear you.
Can't hear you.
Where you're on mute.
Lost your sound, Joe. Jenny, can you assist here? Or Shari?
Councillor Mcdonald, will see where she is at. Just one moment.
And just my apologies to Councillor Daly. I see your hand up, Grant, and I'm assuming that you would have wanted to have some kōrero after Matt. So my apologies. I'll let you have that kōrero when Jo has finished hers. Or maybe we can let you have your kōrero, Grant, while we're waiting for Jo to come back.
Okay, yeah, sorry, Mate Moana. It was really a question on the action plan on Project 11, Kaituna River access at Bell Road in particular. I just wanted to bring up an issue that's been brought to the Te Puke Community Board's attention with regard to significant vandalism occurring at the Bell Road boat ramp to cars that are parked there. And there's a guy that's sent us some photos of his car and four other cars that have been vandalised recently. He's asked for possibility of CCTV camera being installed, but also apparently it's a late night gathering point for boy races, and there's evidence of shredded tyres and steel on the ground and rubber marks, obviously, and the problem for kids with bare feet walking around there. So it was really in regard to the potential for the boat ramp as a Waka landing site that there may need to be some consideration for heightened security, and I was just wondering if this might be an appropriate forum to progress that Tānak security did look into it a couple of years ago, installing CCTV. There's no power down there. There's no street lighting to access power from either. So the cost to put in a power feed from PowerCo is $10,000, and then there's additional cost for CCTV. But I just wanted to see if that's appropriate to mention that now, and if it is progressed as a Waka launching site, then there's a couple of good reasons for maybe increasing security down there. But I was also hoping to do the Western Bay upgrade after this as well, if that's still on the table.
Okay. Thank you for raising that with us. Any comments from you, Pam?
So the Bell Road boat ramp isn't a regional council facility. Is that what the question relates to? Sorry, I must admit I was looking at my phone a little bit there.
Yeah, I know it is. It is a Western Bay, asset, I think so. But it could be a submission point to the reserve management plan, or even somehow tied in with the Titania tuna.
Yeah, I think I have worked with Peter Watson from time to time, because we were diverting a lot of boat traffic to Bell Road when the boat ramp at Ford Road was closed during the construction period of the Kaituna rediversion. But now that that work's all complete, yeah, I think it's probably a question that Peter or Matt from the District Council could answer best. And your suggestion of including it in a submission on that reserve management plan might well be a good one.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joe, are you ready to continue? Doesn't appear to be at the moment. So Grant, do you want to continue with your update that you wanted to do from Western Bay?
Yes, I can, if you like. It's pretty brief, but I certainly endorse Matt's comments and invite all submissions, not just to Maru, but also iwi and hapu to the Te Puke Makatu Reserve Management Plan. And it's open now for a couple of months, so there's plenty of opportunity. So just in terms of Western Bay Marai wastewater projects, Western Bay is continuing to work with Marai and the district regarding wastewater reticulation and on-site treatment options, with OSET upgrades scheduled to occur over the next few months, with all upgrades to be completed by June 2022 in the Kaituna River catchment. Work is ongoing with Te Matai, Te Pamu, Waitangi, Ngātui, Moko and Tūhoirangi. Now the Te Puke wastewater treatment plant upgrades, some of you may have already been aware of this, but through the Kaitiaki groups, but the design process is ongoing. The design modelling has confirmed that the Bardenfo process, I've got to Google this myself, is most suitable for the upgrade. The next step is to finalise the basis of design, after which the design process will start. Tendering for the construction is expected by the end of 2023, with the physical upgrade works completed by the end of 2024. So the ongoing long-term alternative options group is still progressing with the wastewater advisory group, and the next meeting of that will be on Monday. So,
I'm sorry, I can't hear any of the conversation, so I will perhaps have to rejoin the meeting, see if that helps.
did everyone else get that?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. In terms of other, there's quite a bit happening between central government and all the councils currently with Three Waters and Future for Local Government, and I guess some of you have been involved with that as well. So our council is meeting with the DIA on Monday for a one-on-one about the Future for Local Government. So and there's also ongoing dialogue with Tangata Whenua, I believe. So that's also something to keep track of because significant changes in all that space. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for that update, Grant, and very heartening to hear the work being done with the Marae Osset project work. So yeah, thanks for the update and the progress that's been made in that area. I know the regional councillors sitting in on this meeting will be also very pleased to hear that, given that we've got a watching brief of that right throughout the Bay of Plenty region. So it's, you know, thank you for the report and the excellent progress that's been made in that space. Thank you. So now we have a problem with our last presentation. Jenny, have you got any suggestions for us? Are we going to wait, or are we going?
Excuse me, Madam Chair. Yes, Joe has just rejoined the meeting. So Joe, can you give us an update?
Kia ora koutou. I have just joined the meeting. My apologies. I haven't heard any of the kōrero or questions regarding the paper, so you may have to fill me in.
It's okay, Joe. We actually allowed Councillor Daly to give his update from Western Bay District Council. So we haven't, yeah, so we haven't gone any further then. So I'll let you continue.
Where had I cut out?
You may have been on your second screen or first slide. You were still talking to your first slide.
I wonder whether I tempt fate and share the screen again.
Had you intended just to speak to us without the slides and just use the report that we've got?
I can do. The slides don't really add too much more other than to point to the pages in the report.
Well, if you're not confident to bring up the slides.
I just thought that might cause the issue, that was all.
Okay.
All right. Well, forgive me if I am repeating a little bit, but all I was mentioning was that on the report on page 62, it outlines what the freshwater program is doing for 2022. And so the key tasks are about developing measurable targets and limits and policy options, and working with tangata whenua and Hapu where they'd like to be involved in the policy for freshwater program. And so,
are you able to turn your video on? Because we're just looking at a black screen at the moment. I think it'd be nicer for us if we're looking at you while you're speaking to us.
Right, has that done it? Ah, there you go.
Yeah, there you go. That's better.
For that.
Yeah. That's better. We can see you instead of looking at a blank, a black screen. Thank you.
Apologies for that, and I'm apologising for the communication as well, because I especially came into the office because from home my internet is so flaky, and yet I get here and it's a bit flaky in itself. Just whizzing through what's in the paper, it's about what we're doing for 2022 in the freshwater policy work program. And you'll remember that we talked about an example vision last time in November, which was based on the Kaituna River documents vision and the outcomes in that. And you'll also remember we're talking about values, and the online engagement tool, that the participate tool that we could go into and add our values to, or check that it covered the values that were important. And now we're moving more towards working on environmental outcomes and targets and rules and things. So working through that national policy statement process. So 2022 is going to be a busy year, working with iwi and Hapu about how they'd like to be involved in the freshwater space and how we might help support with mātauranga Māori input into the process. So I'm not sure whether Ruben and Anaru are on the line, but you'll remember we talked about the te hononga opportunities that iwi, hapu or tangata whenua, or in fact te Maru would like to take up that opportunity. We're also working on a water quality tool, and that will be able to be available publicly. So you'll be able to look at the science, that all the work that the science team and the technical teams have been working on will be available for public, iwi and hapu. You can look at it from one catchment or the whole region, wherever is part of your rohi or your interests. And just on page 64 of the agenda, you'll see that the Strategy and Policy Committee is going to be meeting 3 more times this year. And that's squashed into the first part of the year, because you'll note that the local body elections are in October. And Te Maru will have 2 meetings further than this one for the year, so in May and August. So as material comes forward, we'll be able to bring updates like this one to Te Maru for your input or advice to council as you see fit. And then I just reiterate that the key bit that we're working on at the moment is to try and progress the example long-term vision, and it develops, as I mentioned, reflects the vision and the themes in the river document, and it builds on rather than repeats the effort that has the work in the Kaituna has been going on a long time. There was the strategy ahead of the river document, so there's been a lot of effort putting in place visions, outcomes and actions. So the example vision intends to build on that rather than repeat those rounds of public consultation in the manner of the river document. So I guess the question really is, what is the question? The question's really, are you comfortable in confirming that the example vision that's been provided as a starting point to share with the wider iwi audience, and whether that's the type of vision that we should go forward with for online communication with the wider community? You'll remember that that Chairman Flavel talked about a letter that had been sent to Te Maru. A copy of that is in the agenda attachment 2, so that's on page 71, and that has included the long-term vision there. Yeah, if there's any questions on that or any kōrero about vision.
Kia ora, Joe. Through the chair, just some clarification, I suppose. So the attached letter has that, I suppose, the vision, a proposed vision to start conversations. So Joe, this is just to start with having that wider communication across the entire region around fresh water. Yeah, so it's not actually taking away the vision of the Kaituna. This is a vision to bring everybody together on the same sort of whakaaro.
Yeah, the important bit about this vision though is the National Policy Statement asks Council to set one for every freshwater management unit.
Yeah.
And then it would get turned into an objective that would get into the regional policy statement. So this vision would sit alongside your change 5. So it's an aspirational vision, just like your river document, that would sit there. And then we work out how we might achieve that and how long it might take to achieve it. So the conversations and the process, there will be iterations of the process as we go through, because we're asking iwi in particular, because we need to involve iwi well, it says involve tangata whenua, so it's a very broad term. So iwi hapu, co-governance groups,
Yeah.
what that aspirational long-term vision is. It's got to be something that's reasonable, but it could be a generational thing. It might take us a generation or 2 or 3 to actually achieve some of these things. So the vision is wider ranging, and then we have to set how we're to achieve it, if we can in fact achieve it, and then we'll have to talk about what we could put in place and how long it might take. So in my mind, it makes sense, and especially in the Kaituna and the rangitaiki, to build on the vision that you've got, which is why you'll see that talks about the health and well-being of the Kaituna there, which is your vision for future generations.
Thank you, Jo. I suppose all I'm wanting to kind of get an indication from members through the chair is whether everyone is comfortable with the proposed vision, as that being the question you're asking the members. I think it's also picks up on a point I think Te Taru made earlier around the co-governance groups, maybe the chairs or who are the representatives of those groups, maybe getting together, and could be via this type of Zoom or whatever, just to have that conversation with your team, Jo, or whoever, and at least get the co-governance groups kind of in there and invite iwi to that. So I think the hui is quite specific in regards to that, and maybe that's an invite. I'm just looking for a way forward to get that in the circumstances we were in, you know, with COVID, etc. So maybe that's a way we could move forward on getting some sort of across the region approval of that vision, or our vision.
Madam Chair, can I comment? Yeah, look, I support what Dean is saying. I think, you know, a vision, you know, people, and particularly iwi, would want to be really, in a sense, that's a very important area to co-create, if nothing else. They must be there to actually have that conversation around this. And I think Dean's comment around, you know, the co-governance forums being together, being able to initiate some of that quarter of the presentation that is here being put before them would be very valuable to get that wider spread connect to that vision. And I think that's important. And I think it's important to take the time to do that.
One thing perhaps that I didn't be clear on is that not only has Te Maru got a letter like this, iwi and hapu on our mailing list have also received similar letters with example visions attached, and the example visions, in the Te Maru case, the example vision is about the Kaituna, but for example, I'll just pick one, maybe Ngāti Rangawewahe, for example, their letter would have included the Rotorua Tiaroa Lakes example vision and the Kaituna example vision. So all of the freshwater areas that their rohi contributes to. So yes, that conversation would be really quite good across the co-governance groups. Somehow would need to sort of think about, perhaps get Anaru and Ruben and Riki Lee involved in how we kind of articulate a wānanga that could be co-governance wide. There could be the 3 co-governance groups, but maybe landing on a Kaituna specific one and a Rotorua Tiaroa Lakes one. So yeah, interesting. We would take your lead on how you might like to have a wānanga on that.
I think the co-governance groups meetings, you know, given the membership of them, and given the fact that they are representative of their particular iwi hapu entities, are the best starting point, to be quite frank. Te Arawa Lakes Trust are involved in the Kaituna, you know, so that conversation can easily be spread via those co-governance groups as a core starting for this, as starting point for this. I think it's the best place to start. And what's your view, Dean? I think you've already articulated it.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think if we could work maybe with the chairs and is it Anaru? Yeah, and Ruben, I think you mentioned.
Ruben Gardner, Anaru and Ricky Lee.
Yeah, so maybe we just have a conversation via Zoom or on the phone or something, and then just do a little bit of tactical kind of proposing, I suppose, on how we might do this.
Kia ora, Dean. I'd like to tautoko that kōrero, both you and Te Taru as well. I totally support that about coming together to have a kōrero. Joe, I did note in the part of the letter that the example vision is based on existing documents with aspirations for Kaituna, and you've used other documents as well, the RPS, change regional coastal iwi management plans. So you have looked at those to look at that. And I guess the question to you, going through those and analyze, and I suppose the part of your answer will be yes. Was there common synergies of each of those that you looked at? Because I'm betting there was.
There most definitely was, through you, Chair. In developing these examples, we've worked on the iwi management plans. We must recognise those, and so we had a look at the Tapaweka iwi management plan. Ngāti Pikia's document's quite old, but we looked for some synergies there. Ngāti Whakāwai ki Makatu's one of the more recent hapu management plans. Ngāti Rangawaiwahei Ngā Potiki's environmental plan, and Ngāti Rangatihi, that one's a little bit older too. It's fair to say there was a huge alignment. Councillor Mcdonald, I think it's fair to say that there's some very strong themes, and that the river document by and large has picked those up beautifully. You'll see in the example vision, it goes a little, and this might be one thing that Te Maru might want to think about. Down the bottom, there's I've put some number 9 and 10 there are about the estuary, and about getting water that's healthy, which supports and causes no further decline for the estuary. And that was a step we couldn't take in the river document because it was about the river, you'll remember. So this vision can be a little broad, a little wider. It can talk about the health of the estuary, and then when we put in place limits for the fresh water in the rivers, that will help support the estuary. So there's that aspect. It can be a little broader than the river document, and definitely the iwi management plans were very, very strong. Like Maru said, the estuary is where some of the passion and perhaps the tensions lie, but in the iwi management documents, there's great alignment.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe. And I guess just a word of advice to staff, what you've just said is probably key to express when we bring the groups together, like Dean and Te Taru are talking about, you know, and to provide this information to what you've collated, what you've analysed, because all this work belongs to them. And, you know, mindful of the resourcing within their camps. Because if you've looked at it, they've already done a lot of the work beforehand anyway. You know, we're coming back now to revisit what they want, what they've been wanting. And I guess this process is another opportunity to activate some of those aspirations that they've been waiting for over the years. You know, what's happening now is that those times are now happening, and they're here and now. So, you know, to avoid them having to revisit or thinking they have to revisit and start from step one is not actually the case, because they've already done a lot of work. But I think what needs to be reiterated by council staff is that here it is, here's what you've given us, here's what we've analysed, which may help you to determine the how and the who and the when, because the what is already obviously sitting there. But before, so that's just for me, but I see Councillor Nees also has her hand up. So Jane.
Thank you. I don't want to comment on the thrust of the draft vision, but there's a couple of technical things I just wanted to raise and check before it goes. And I think, Joe, you said it's already gone wide, but just the first, on page 72, where you've got your example, that's the draft vision, isn't it? Because in the first section, you talk about the values and objectives of the estuary. I wouldn't have thought the estuary has objectives in and of itself. So I just wonder whether that wording is quite right. Also in number 6, I think there's a typo there where we talk about these species begin and recover. Shouldn't it be begin to recover?
Yeah.
And then further down, we talk about the Kaituna FMU together with Lake Rotorua and Lake Rotoiti. Are you meaning the FMUs of Lake Rotoiti and Lake Rotorua, or are you talking about the lakes themselves? It just seems to be a bit odd that on the one hand, we're talking about the Kaituna FMU, but we're talking about the actual lakes themselves for Lake Rotorua and Lake Rotoiti. So there's a little bit of technical stuff in there that I'm not quite sure about, and I just wanted to raise so that you could consider that.
Yes, you will see that there are a couple of brackets around some terms there, right up in the top is either support or cause no further decline, and then there's either as a vision, there was in the documents, when you look through them, there was some being very strong in including the upper catchment. So that's where we were thinking of the Lake Rotorua and Lake Rotoiti, bringing that in, but perhaps not being the bit that's connected to the Kaituna isn't the whole Rotorua Tiaroa Lakes. Of course, there's a wider thing there. So it is quite drafty at the same time, but I take your point that we need to be reasonably, well, as we develop the vision, we're going to need to be clear about whether it's the water in the lake versus the catchments that contribute, those sorts of things. So the bits in the brackets, you know, for example, when the community group talk about this, there's some people that are saying, well, actually supporting the healthy ecosystem may be a step too far when we start looking at, when we are starting to understand the reduction of nitrogen and phosphorus we need to even get to a moderate health in the estuary is a huge ask. And the science that we were working up, even with the previous plan change 12 that came to Kaituna, there's some significant reductions needed. So there will definitely be some discussion about whether we're supporting, maintaining, improving all the language that's in the freshwater policy statement versus actually are we in a position where we just need to cause no further decline? That might be a couple of generations to get to that point. So I guess as we work through the vision, we're going to have those conversations, and there'll be different points of view on those very things, and there will be very different points of view on whether we just talk about the Kaituna freshwater management area, or are we actually talking about what the Lake Rotorua and Lake Rotoiti bring to the top of the Kaituna, bearing in mind there's going to be a vision for that Rotorua Tiaroa Lakes. So yeah, that's going to be part of the conversation and part of the involving iwi and involving the wider community in those discussions. The iwi management plans are quite strong on the Kiuta, Ki Tai aspect and keeping the wider, the upper catchment as part of it. And we'll have to have those discussions about how those knit together in the conversations. I'll have a look at the wording there that you've mentioned, Councillor Nees, about the wording about the objectives about the estuary. There are objectives in the coastal plan, but I take your point, the the estuary doesn't have the objectives, our planning documents have the objectives.
Thank you, Joe. Tataru, is your hand up from the last time, or is that a new one? Well, I've got Tataru and Pim. Oh, Pim. You've got your hand up.
Oh, it's you put it up. Yeah, in your planning documents, if we take the Māori worldview and modern science, have you taken into account water harvesting and secondary use water? As an example, there are huge buildings like Fonterras and all that. There could be provisions for secondary use water off the roofs, and and flooding. There's a lot of water goes out to sea. Could those water be captivated and used as secondary use, probably for kiwi fruit and such?
The short answer is yes, some of that work will result in, so once we get the vision about where we want to aspirationally be for the Kaituna, then we'll work out how big of a problem have we got to get there. What will happen is that some of those, we'll have to think about how we get there and how to achieve it. So some of those very things that you're talking about will be formed up into things to achieve that. So they'll end up as hopefully as quite permissive things that the regional plan will allow us to do. So they might turn into rules that would allow for the very things that you're talking about. Ka pai.
Is that logged in the national policy, anything like that? Could not that be a lobby to the national policy?
But certainly we need to, part of getting to moving from the status quo, like Pim was talking about, to a better place, we're going to have to work on things that we need to put in place to get there. So some things like rain harvesting may well be a tool that would help if the water, if there's not enough water in the system, then things like that will need to be considered, yes.
Thanks.
Do we have any other further comments and questions from the members? I don't have any, Joe, so back to you. Oh, sorry. I've got Mokoera and then Dean. Sorry, Joe.
Kia ora, Joe. Oh, heck, I've forgotten what it was now, gosh. Shameless. We'll go to Dean quickly before I gather my thoughts again. Heck.
That's fine. Dean, I'll come back to you, Mokoera. Dean.
Oh, hey, it's not so much around the vision and that, but I mean, the word mumuia, the dreaming, I felt like I've been doing the dreaming for the Kaituna for all my life. So it'd be nice to get to a point where we're beyond dreaming and we're actually the doing, which we are practically in. So the vision for the Kaituna may sit in a different time, I suppose, but that's not really what I want. I put my hand up. It's just Joe. I just want to bring or highlight to members in Joe's report, point 3, the RPS change 5. Just in there, the chief water commissioner has appointed Anton Coffin, and as the chair for that hearings panel, and Rawiri Faulkner has been in place for the Tangata Whenua member or iwi member, and then we have Andrew as regional council and Judge Laureen Newhook, who's taken Professor Skelton's position in that. So I just wanted to raise that, which will then mean that the plan change 5 will be later on in the year when the hearings. I don't know if we have a date yet, but I'm sure we'll be informed if there is a date. But I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, considering we're going through that process last year and filed. So yeah, that's all really.
Thank you, Dean. And if any of the Western Bay staff are still on board, just to mention, Laweri Faulkner can lay fame to claim around his excellent work he did back in the days in the development of the Makatu Community Development Plan, which undertook a process was that I think has been lost in future processes being used by local government, and that they used a dual process where they had a dual process, a tangata whenua process running alongside regional council. Identical processes, but the facilitators win that. And Awiri was the facilitator who facilitated the whole tangata whenua component that provided the successful outcome, I thought, in that Makatu Community Development Plan. So, you know, watch the space where he's involved, because he certainly was pivotal in enabling the development of that plan back in the, I don't know, 80s, 90s. So, yeah, just a bit of information. Thank you, Dean. Mokoera, can we go back to you?
Yes, kia ora, thank you. Just lifting off from where Papa Maru had come from and your response to him, given that there's been low water levels and low water flows all across the region, and including the Rotorua region, I think it might be pretty wise to come up with other avenues such as water harvesting and secondary water use, or things along those lines. I'm sure there's probably very, very clever people whose line of work entails all of this. So yeah, just because we've been having similar kōrero around the Waiari as well, and the low water flow and low water levels, including the dry summer and everything around the environment at the moment, it might be pretty wise to start looking ahead into that, into this kind of the whole kaupapa there. Kia ora, that's just my whakaaro here. I'll let other people with actual kōrero and pātai. Kia ora.
Thank you. And I can see Jo nodding her head. So I guess what she's saying is yes. Do you want to respond, Jo?
Yes. As I said before, I'm going to just, if I disappear, it's because my battery is running very low. It's not, but then if I just go poof. So I will respond though. It's certainly, that's what this National Policy for Freshwater policy statement is asking us to do, is to set those water limits, so both quality and quantity, at the right place so that we can address these low flows. We can't obviously address when the gods don't be kind and there's ongoing droughts as there is now, but it is the place that will set those limits and will set up ways to deal with things as if there is water shortages, how the plan intends to respond to that. So some of these suggestions will all be in that mix.
Thank you. Do I have any other comments or questions from the floor? I don't appear to. All right, thank you, Jo. Before you go, just in case there are others, can I please have a mover and seconder for that report, please? That was the report on Essential Freshwater Policy Program 2022 by Jo. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you, Jane. And a seconder? I can't see, so I'm going to choose somebody. I guess I can. Thank you, Councillor White. All those in favour, please raise your right hand. Thank you, carried. Excellent, thank you, Joe. Well, everybody, that appears to bring us to a close. I don't have anything further. Just checking back though with Councillor Daly. Were you able to express everything you wanted?
Yes, thank you. Marty, thank you for your comments about Te Puke Community Development Plan. I've just been looking at it to, and I could circulate that if you like.
Thank you. Okay, everybody, that we've come to the end of our program, and my apologies, I didn't give you a coffee break. Look, I was just so engrossed in the agenda, found everything quite riveting, and I forgot to give you a coffee break, so my apologies. I no doubt when Dean's back on board, he will be giving you coffee breaks. So, Dean, kei a koe?
Kei manu pene.
Okay.
Ka pai. There you are, Manu. Tarako to you.
Okay. E whakakapi I wā tātou hui, e nui tātou. Kia tau kia tātou katoa te atawhai, o tō tātou hariki ai Ukrainki. Me te aroha o te atua, me te whiwinga tahitanga i te wairua tapu, hake tonu atu. Āmene.
Thank you, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a great weekend.
Ka kite.